My business partner stole everything we built together. A random phone call exposed him completely. I'm 29. 4 years ago, I quit my marketing job to start a meal prep delivery company with my coworker Reed. We'd been friends for 3 years, spent 6 months planning it on lunch breaks, pooled our savings, $34,000 each, and signed a 50-50 partnership agreement in Reed's kitchen while his dog knocked over a plant. It was a good business. Not glamorous, but real. We had 340 weekly subscribers by year 2, 3 part-time drivers, a commercial kitchen lease in Philadelphia. I handled operations, hiring, and supplier relationships. Reed handled the website, marketing, and client accounts. We didn't overlap much, which felt efficient at the time. Looking back, that was the problem. In January of last year, I noticed our ingredient supplier had changed. The quality dropped, proteins were arriving a day older than before, produce was inconsistent. When I asked Reed about it, he said he'd found a cheaper vendor to improve margins. Made sense on the surface. I was busy. I let it go. 2 months later, one of our drivers, a quiet guy named Pat, asked me quietly in the parking lot if the company was in trouble. I said no, why? He said he'd overheard Reed on the phone talking about wrapping things up before summer. I went home that night and pulled up our shared accounting software. My login credentials no longer worked. Reed had changed the passwords. When I called him, he was calm. Said there'd been a security update, he'd send me new credentials in the morning. The credentials never came. Instead, 3 days later, I received a letter from an attorney stating that Reed was initiating a buyout clause in our partnership agreement, a clause I barely remembered, buried on page 9, that allowed either partner to trigger a forced buyout with 30 days notice at a valuation of their choosing, subject to dispute. His valuation of my 50% share, $11,000. We had built something worth nearly $400,000. I got an attorney. She told me the clause was aggressive but potentially enforceable, and that fighting it would cost more than $11,000 in legal fees with no guaranteed outcome. Reed knew exactly what he was doing. He'd consulted a lawyer long before he told me anything. I started asking questions, to suppliers, to the drivers, to the kitchen staff. What I found was that Reed had spent the past 8 months quietly redirecting our highest value clients to a new LLC he'd registered under his girlfriend's name. Same service, slightly lower price, launched before he triggered the buyout. By the time he pushed me out, he'd already moved 60% of our revenue to his new company. It was clean. Deliberate. Patient in a way that made me feel sick, because I'd eaten lunch with this man 3 times a week for 3 years. I disputed the valuation and filed for a full financial audit through my attorney. It would take months. Meanwhile Reed was operating, growing, posting about entrepreneurship on LinkedIn. I picked up freelance work, sublet my apartment, moved into my sister's place. Then in April, I got a phone call from a woman named Diane. She ran a competing meal prep service in the same city. She'd found my number through an old press mention of our company. She said she wanted to talk about Reed. Diane had been approached by Reed 6 months earlier about a potential merger. During that conversation, he'd shared financial documents about our company, internal projections, client lists, pricing structures, things that were confidential. She'd declined them